Well, so here you are. I can't see you. I can see some people down here. They look really good. I mean, they look great here in the light. The ones in the dark, I'm sure, are fine too. So this is a pilgrimage. An old philosopher in Greece, a Greek philosopher, ages and ages ago, who was very wise, he said that experience, you're having an experience tonight. If you don't realize that you're having an experience, you wait till tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. It's an experience. An experience, he said, experience comes from many memories, ex multis memoriis. Even animals have this experience. They have memory. Animals can remember things. Even honeybees can go miles away looking for pollen and come back to their hive. They remember. Only human beings, though, only we human beings remember and are conscious of our spiritual being and can appreciate it. And so from experience and these memories comes a kind of knowledge of the world we live in, and then love also comes out of knowledge. So that's sort of what you're engaged in here. We are always engaged in this sort of thing, but especially when you get away from your usual home and circumstances and all the comforts of home, it's a little bit hard on a pilgrimage. There's some hardships, but that's the kind of thing that you'll remember. I can remember as a Boy Scout in the mountains of New Mexico being totally miserable. We're in the clouds. It wasn't raining. We were in the clouds. Everything was wet. And we're attacked by the bears who took our food and our sleeping bags, because everything was in plastic they knew to take away. And the scoutmaster wouldn't let us do anything. Of course, what do you do with bears? There's several of them. And I saw them take away my sleeping bag. I wasn't a Christian then, and so I was close to despair there. This is really my only dry thing I had left was the sleeping bag. They took it away. But then the bears took away the scoutmaster's sleeping bag, and he said, "Attack!" And we all got logs, and we threw logs at the bears, and they ran away. They got our food, but we got our sleeping bags back. And you see, that was really miserable, but I remember that. Whereas having a fun time at the pool or something, I just don't really remember. It's not so much of an experience. So there's something very poetic about a pilgrimage, very much an experience, but it takes a little bit of adversity. By the way, when I'll talk all night. Just tell me to stop when you want. Adversity is like this, and a great poet, a great man who wrote plays and things by the name of Willie Shakespeare, he has this passage where he says, "Sweet are the uses of adversity, which like the toad, ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel in its forehead." That's to say, the toads in England have a little diamond-shaped figure on the head of the toad. Now, have you met toads? I mean, they're not really very nice. They're not always venomous or anything, but who likes toads, So Shakespeare is saying, well, adversity, like tomorrow morning when some man yells for you to get up, you're going to think, gosh, that's terrible, that's adversity. Adversity is harsh on us, but it has great advantages. We get better somehow by this. He talks about the wind, the north wind that beats on our backs and mercifully teaches us what we really are. We realize how weak we are when we face nature. But it also has advantages, you see, to be out away from things. And Shakespeare says, and this our life, this is about a duke who loses his power in Italy and has to flee into the forests in what's now Belgium, Ardennes Forest. He says to his companions, this is great. He's used to a plush home with nice furniture and breakfast and everything. The Duke is saying, this, our life, though free from public haunt, finds tongues in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything. Now that is really profoundly said, and this is a Christian writing that. It's not a Christian story per se, but it's in the context of a whole Catholic culture, like you're trying to promote and live here. We're not trying to, we are. This is really a Catholic moment. This pilgrimage to Three Hearts, it's unlike about anything going on in the world. There are some pilgrimages like this, but it's a pretty rare moment. Most people, children, adults, often don't have the occasion to do anything quite like this. So there's a certain adversity. So now here you are in, this is Oklahoma, if you just arrived. This is Oklahoma, Cherokee County. It's one of the poorest places in America. Not that people live in misery, but it's very, very poor. And often it's in poor places that you find the most industrious people who have to make an effort. This is the area where the cowboys were. I mean, the real cowboys. Rooster Cogburn came out here to catch Lucky Ned, whatever his name was, who was a band of bad guys, and brought them back to Arkansas where they would hang often. They had the judge back there. And this is the area where Pistol Pete, who was a real cowboy, is not a Hollywood thing. He really lived in the time of the cowboys. He lived around here. He was a deputy marshal for a time. He was the fastest draw around, and he killed many men, always in a fair fight. He was also a deputy marshal. And at Clear Creek, we have a brother who, when he was a little baby, was held in the hands of, that's right, Pistol Pete held him in his hands when he was a little baby. So it's not that long ago that this place was full of a certain poetry that made America. It was Christian. It wasn't Catholic generally, although now Pistol Pete had a girlfriend for a while who was Catholic, and she gave him a relic. This is all written down by Pistol Pete later in his life. She gave him a relic around his neck. And when he was in a gunfight in Texas about some range wars or something, that protected the bullet. I mean, the relic deflected the bullet, and he was saved by that. The girl died of a disease. He didn't marry her. He married someone else. But, it was the Catholic Church was much present in all of these places. Santa Fe, New Mexico, and places where you had Sister Blondine, who was this incredible nun, friend of Billy the Kid. I mean, friend in the sense that she helped some of his men and didn't turn him in. So there's a lot of history out here. There was a sheriff of Tahlequah who was a courageous man, a very good man, Christian man, and he was fearless, and he was in a gunfight on the property of Clear Creek where you're going. That was just a few decades ago, well, a while now, it must have been in the 1930s. And he was well loved, and he died in his bed. He was shot a few times, but he was a brave man, a good man, Christian man. And so it's not that far behind us. We live now in a more complex sort of world. I see pilgrims still coming in. And it's a different challenge. But the basic principle of it all is what you need. You need a first principle that you can always go back to, that you can count on, And so, well, that's God, of course. Even pagans know this. Most people know that there's got to be some kind of first principle that explains the universe, and it's God. But you don't have direct access to God. He's worked it out so he made a bridge, though, so you can get to God. And the bridge is really the humanity of Christ. So Christ is both God and man, and so it's like a bridge you can go across. And it's in the church that you have real access to Christ and to this bridge. But anytime, anywhere you are, whatever happens to you, you can always speak with God in your heart, in your mind. And so you've got a first principle that can't be taken away from you. If your first principle is to have money, and you can protect yourself by having a lot of money, or if it's to have the right type of pistol, or if it's to have political power or whatever, all these things can be taken away, but nobody can take God away from you. Nobody can really take your soul or make you think or do what they want deep down, even if they could harm you in some way. But no, you're here on an experience, and you will remember this certainly. I think the weather's going to be pretty good. Sometimes when you're on an adventure, it turns bad. When you're on a real adventure, there's usually a moment when you think, boy, I'd like to go home. I've just had enough of this. I'd just really like to go home now. And it might happen tomorrow, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you might be thinking, but by the grace of God and the love of your parents or whoever and the organizers that, will get you through, you'll get through. And then things will start looking up on Saturday when you're heading towards the last stage of the journey. So sweet are the uses of adversity. It's a good thing. We definitely want happiness, so we're not looking for eternal adversity. It's not like this is what we want to. What we want is a certain thing that the theologians would call beatitude. Beatitude means you get to a sort of state that you can't even imagine here below, because there's always something going on. We're too cold, or we're too hot, or we're hungry, or this or that. Little bitty kids kind of get a sense of this, but beatitude means everything is kind of fine, and we human beings have a natural desire for happiness. We even have a kind of natural desire, says St. Thomas at least, the great theologians, we have a natural inborn desire to see God and to have a supernatural end, a supernatural vision of God. It's somehow, because we're created in the image and likeness of God, nothing will really suffice completely until we see God. We can have a lot of happiness. Some people like wine. A peasant in France once said, he told his parish priest, Father, heaven for me means there'll be a giant vat of wine, and I'll be kind of floating, and once in a while I'll just open my mouth. Well, that's just not true. It's just not true. It doesn't work. Sensual things, pleasures, candy bars, whatever, all this is just, it brings a certain joy. And there's nothing wrong with that, and liking things and having good things. But only God and the vision of God will be the final thing that really makes everybody totally happy and makes all the experiences of your life come together. Then you'll understand it all. This moment and all the other moments, school or marriage or whatever, you'll understand it all in the final synthesis. You can't imagine that, though, because if you could imagine heaven, you'd already have it somehow. It wouldn't be fair. You got to wait until heaven to have the final answer to it all. Some bad kids I've known of, including me, some bad kids I know would try to find their Christmas presents before Christmas and look at them. What a shame. You don't want Christmas until Christmas. You don't want your presents until they come. We'll get heaven when it comes. You can't have it on earth for a certain amount of money or whatever, but God is making you hunger and thirst for that, little by little, especially when you see sad things that happen in the world, or you hear about, or people you begin to long for kind of happiness that doesn't have upsetting things or scary things or whatever. And it's coming. God's got this in mind, but your life is an adventure. It really is an adventure. You think, well, boy, I read about this person this boy or this girl in the books, and I'd like to have a life like that of adventure. Well, you do, actually. Do you know there are actually evil spirits in hell that would like to kill you, like to take you to hell? It's a big adventure. It's a bigger adventure than The Hobbit. That's the Lord of the Rings. You're in a very big adventure. You just don't realize it quite yet. But you've got what you need, which is not a magic ring. Uh, what you need is God, and you get this through the church, even if you're disappointed sometimes by this or that priest or this or that thing. Without the church, you don't really have the bridge to get to God. You don't have Christ in his full humanity and divinity. The thing about Christ, he's both God and man. He's not just man. Some people like to think of Christ as just a nice man, and some people have thought that he's just God, that he's not really man. But you don't get the saving effect of Christianity unless you have a God-man who's kind of a bridge. St. Catherine of Siena, this is a smart girl. She never went to school. She is a doctor of the church. It's not easy to become a doctor of the church, especially if you're a woman. I mean, you really got to have it together. St. Catherine of Siena, you have to read about her. And she had these things dictated to her by God the Father directly, and she would say it out loud, and the theologian would write it all down. It's called the Dialogues. No, it's not the Dialogues. I'm sorry. The Dialogue, the singular, of St. Catherine of Siena. Amazing book. This is God the Father speaking through her and telling you all sorts of things that you can read about. This is in the Middle Ages. We live in the very modern times or postmodern times. We're a little bit different than those people. But you can get to know other epics if you read about them. And once you read more about the Middle Ages, you begin to understand it. A lot of what's going on here is a kind of throwback to the Middle Ages, which were great. They were more Catholic, more Christian. You know, you had the Crusades. Some things were bad that happened in the Crusades, but some of it was an excellent exercise of faith, just trying to protect the Holy Land for pilgrims. Pilgrims. The Crusades was all about pilgrims going to visit the Holy Land, the sepulchre where Christ was buried, you know, the Saint-Sepulchre. You're going on a pilgrimage to Clear Creek Abbey. So that's the thing. A pilgrimage has a definite end. It's not just going out to walk around. You can do that too, I get. Walk around. It's like the motorcycle guy in the 1960s. You say, "Where are you going on the motorcycle?" "I don't know, man. I'm just going. I'm just going." Well, that doesn't go very far. That guy winds up in a ditch in jail, and you know, you just can't. You want to be going somewhere to have any fun, to have any meaning, and that's what a pilgrimage is. I hope people in the back can sort of hear me. Otherwise, we'll send you the text. Although I don't have one, as you can see, I don't have one. I could make one up though. So where were we? So you need to be going somewhere, and in the Middle Ages, there was an extraordinary phenomenon of people going by thousands to the Holy Land, soldiers to fight, and others just to visit the Holy Land. And they went through untold dangers, being robbed, being murdered sometimes, being hurt by robbers along the way. It was a very, very hard thing. And they went because they're filled with faith. And that's how a pilgrimage like this should be, a question of faith. And you don't have to think about that all the time. You can just be walking along the road. As long as you keep going in the right direction, you're still doing the pilgrimage. You don't have to be thinking of God all the time. We human beings have to have a little recreation sometimes. The first monks were in Egypt in the desert. They started out, and often they were by themselves. They were hermits. And the most famous one, St. Anthony, he went out and was living in this old fortress by himself, and he wanted to pray all the time, because our Lord says it. I mean, it says in the Bible to pray all the time. We should pray all the time. So he was trying to do that, singing psalms or whatever all the time, and he was going crazy. He was losing his mind. He didn't know what to do. And an angel came to show him what to do, he says. An angel came to show St. Anthony how to get by in this life in the best manner. So the angel didn't really say anything. He just showed him. He would work for a while, then he would pray for a while, read for a while, work for a while. See, the work, good manual work, it's very relaxing. Men really appreciate this. You take a man who's a businessman, who's a nervous wreck from working on the computers all day in town, and you give him a wheelbarrow, he comes back to life. Give him a shovel. And women, too, have their own sorts of manual things. It's part of this prayer experience that's leading you to beatitude. It's okay to knit, or I don't know what women do. I don't have it. What do they do? They must do something. But anyway, you could, it's okay, and you can be praying while you're doing this, or not even praying, but have the intention to renew your spirit a little bit in your body so that you can then be more balanced. The monastic idea is to have a balanced day. We have about 8 hours of work, 8 hours of prayer and study, and 8 hours of sleep. That's how the monks live. It's a very special life, though, of course, because the normal human life is marriage and children, and it's just the normal thing. But we somehow had this particular vocation, and we can pray more that way. We can pray for you and pray for the world, but we try to live a balanced life by having manual labor. Everybody does some work outside, milk the cows, take care of the animals, dig ditches, or whatever. Vegetable garden. We have a wonderful vegetable garden. Wow, I haven't been going quite a while yet. Vegetable garden. We have cattle. We have a wood shop, a metal shop. We have all these things, and that really, for a lot of young men, that helps them a lot. They can't just sit inside and pray all day, or go to the library. Some, though, are library rats, and they just like to go in the library and read all day, and they have glasses, and they just get a lot out of books. But like Shakespeare was saying, you can find books in the running brooks. You can find, a certain message in nature. St. Bernard, who is a doctor of the church too, St. Bernard of Clairvaux, said that he learned more in the woods from trees than he did from books. And he knew a lot of books. His Latin is beautiful, just a beautiful Latin. He writes about the Blessed Virgin Mary. It's incredibly beautiful. And, but he said he learned more in the forest because the Trappist monks, well, they were Cistercians, not Trappists. Cistercian monks did a lot of manual labor in his time. So that's a key. And the pilgrimage, the walking part is sort of like that. It's a little bit intense, maybe. You're exercising your legs and stuff more than you would in a more habitual kind of manual labor, but it's a good experience that will teach you something too. Of course, what's more interesting is people. In a pilgrimage, you might have the chance to talk to people you wouldn't normally speak with. And as you're away from the more hectic and intense things that are in town, you could probably have more interesting conversations along the road. There's a lot of talk in Rome right now about the synod, which means in Greek, going together on the road. Well, you're the real synod. I mean, you're going to be on the road tomorrow, and you're going to be talking, and that's really what the Greek word synod would mean. You're together on a road. And so that's all good. And so we've covered God, marriage, work. What haven't we covered yet? Eating, well, don't worry about that too much. He's got some coffee tomorrow morning, but it sounds kind of slim. But eventually there'll be something to survive on. And when you're really hungry, that's when you really enjoy food. So when you really, when I was in the mountains in New Mexico, we took a hike one day, and we ran out of water, and it was very hot, and we were seriously thirsty. Now, the experts tell us now, don't wait until you're thirsty to drink. I said, forget it. I drink when I'm thirsty, you see. Anyway, we were beyond thirsty, and the scoutmasters told us, when you get to the camp, don't drink too much cold water, because there's this beautiful fountain of cold water at this camp. And when we saw it, we just ran as fast as we could and jumped in. We're drinking all the water we could, because boy, was that tasting good. One of the scouts, by the way, got very sick and had to be sent back to the base camp because he was so sick from not obeying the scoutmasters. So that's a really big one, obedience. You don't really have a vow of obedience out here on a pilgrimage, but you do have people telling you things they keep saying useful. They mean you better do it, is what they mean. Get those tent pegs out of the ground, this kind of thing. But obedience really is the virtue of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And her Annunciation, she gives the perfect model of virtue in her saying, "Here, behold the handmaid of the Lord." That is an indication of the virtue of humility. She's saying, I'm just a maid. In the real Greek, it means slave, really. She says, I'm just a slave of the Lord. That's not feminism there. That's really, that's true feminism, but it's not the kind of proud ideologies that you hear now. She's really humble. And then she says, fiat, let it be done to me according to your word. Now that's obedience. So with those two virtues, there you really go far. That's beyond being a pilgrim. That's being a saint. If you can work your way up to being a saint, you get closer to beatitude faster. Well, now, I don't know if we're supposed to have questions, but if you raise your hand, I won't have the slightest idea. Maybe we don't have questions and answers here. Maybe, and there's no one here to bail me out. I think it's time to finish though, because you need to get some food and you need to relax and think. I will give you a blessing. Yes, I'm going to give it to you in Latin. Is that okay? I only know it. Okay. Sit nomen nomini benedictum, ex hoc nunc usque in seculum, adjutorium nostrum in nomine Domini, qui fecit cerant, benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen. Thanks. Have a great pilgrimage.